Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink, it is time for some Path of Exile discussion. Welcome to day 3 of Teaser Season for patch 3.25 and the upcoming Settlers of Kalgur expansion. Today we have two pieces of news coming out of Grinding Gear Games. One of them fairly unofficial, and I'll just put a link to that. It's a post on the website formerly known as Twitter by Grinding Gear Games' music director Camille, and it is just a very short snippet into some of the work that went into producing the soundtrack for Settlers of Kalgur. Now, the second teaser from Grinding Gear Games was a quality of life based thing, and this is the waypoint changes that are going to be going live in patch 3.25. These are a very small quality of life thing, but they will be very welcome if, like me, you've ever made the mistake of running past waypoints that you want to return to later in the campaign. For example, you might have run past the Crossroads waypoint in both Act 2 and Act 7, mistakes I've definitely made, or most devastatingly, running past the Crystal Veins waypoint. I've made that mistake exactly once and it was painful. There's a few other ones as well. There's a Battlefront in Act 3 that can be quite painful to miss. What's going to happen now is that you don't need to click on the waypoint. Instead, you just need to get fairly close to it. How close, you might be asking? Well, this frame is not close enough. This frame is close enough. So that should give you some information there as to exactly how close you need to be. There have been some little bits of hidden information in some of these videos in the past. A number of people thought there might have been hidden info in this one with a skill that's on right click, but that skill is just Eyeshot supported by momentum support. So nothing particularly new there, nothing that you can't activate in Act 1 at the moment. The second thing I wanted to bring up though is a little bit of a League End community build project that I'm going to be running that's going to be trying to run a number of different candidates for potential league starters people might be interested in starting in patch 3.25 and trying to assemble a bunch of links to footage of people running them up to the third Void Stone, so up to the Maven. The reason I'm choosing to go to the Maven here rather than the commonly chosen Eater and Exarch setup is that a lot of builds perform much better up to Eater and Exarch and then start to fall off pretty hard, whereas going to the Maven you need to have a slightly stronger character all around, and that means that you can find out those builds that are just really good at clearing the early parts of the game, but that don't scale up well to soft bossing and other content like that. Motivation here is that there's a fair bit of what I'd term an issue in build planning at the moment, and that is that the most work goes into optimizing the builds that are already known to be pretty good, so they end up with really thorough guides and a lot of research goes into them. Not as much work goes into determining whether builds are adequate or terrible. One really good example of this is that I believe it was in Sanctum League, there was a huge uptick in interest quite early in the league in a couple of particular items, Rathpinth Globe and Calm's Heart being the main ones. And the reason for this was that most of the English language Path of Exile player base had not yet caught on to the fact that Hexblast Mines was a really, really good setup. But a couple of content creators had created Korean language content advocating this build. And so you had this interesting scenario where, because no one in the English speaking PoE community had tried to optimize this build and tried to come up with a league start plan for it, it wasn't really considered as a league starter by most of us. But the Korean player base had worked out, oh, this is a really good setup, and they created a build that was good at endgame and an entire pathway to it. Now, since then, there's been a number of refinements that have been made to that build, and a lot of players aren't interested in using the life stacking and Rathpinth approach anymore. They've found other solutions. But that should give you a bit of a sense that there can be some really hidden builds out there that people don't realize are good until someone goes and tests them. This project's intended to try and address that a little bit, and also to just gather some evidence that some builds might actually be truly derisory. For example, I experimented with Glacial Cascade of the Fissure during this league as a mine build, expecting it to be bad, and found out that it was actually worse than I expected. That's something I think is still useful for the community to know. So my plan is pretty simple here. I want to brainstorm dozens of builds, have a community effort to level lots of them in the dying days of 3.24, and this is probably something that's best done in permanent solo self-found if you're not someone that's interested in that game mode. If you are someone that does value your progress in permanent solo self-found, you probably instead want to do it on a new account, because then you'll be able to transfer out of solo self-found and then reset your progress if you want to run another one. What I'd really like to do is to have a short write-up of each of 30 or 40 different builds, maybe even more than that, and also links to video footage that's not done by the best players in the game. So we're not looking at races that can get Maven down in 10 hours 30 on a fresh start, but instead something that might be a bit longer than that, that'll have to be segmented because YouTube caps out at 12 hours, and that then can provide information for people who are considering a build so they can have a look at it and see, okay, here's what it looks like when it's playing the game at level 40, here's what it looks like when it's playing the game at level 70, here's a bunch of leveling POBs that were actually from a run. Does that look like something I want to run? Yeah, it does. Okay, cool. I'm going to keep this one bookmarked, check if it survives the patch notes, and then cry when it doesn't. Anyways, this is going to be organized in my Discord. I don't like generating clickable links to the Discord because there's no end of bad actors on the internet, but I've burnt an image into the screen now of a link to that Discord. Unfortunately, you'll need to transcribe this across. I know that's a pain on mobile, but I promise you it's less of a pain than having a lot of spammers in there. Anyway, that's it for both official news from day 3 and also an unofficial side project I'm launching. May your Varlorbs have interesting results, and I will see you around.